Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my Endless Diary Tales channel? Thank you so much. Let's get divorced, Lynn. As for the child, I won't hold you accountable, but this marriage must end. I looked straight at the man I had loved for 2 lifetimes. The words Ethan Carter had prepared instantly got stuck in his throat because of my single sentence. His handsome face froze in shock, as if he had never imagined I would react this way. In my previous life, when he said the 2 words divorce, I had cried, screamed, and begged as if my life depended on it. I clung to his trouser leg, refusing to let go, telling him I couldn't live without him. He said the loss of our child wasn't my fault, and I humbled myself to the lowest point possible, only to receive deeper disgust and 15 years of his cold violence. Until the day his beloved Emily White pushed me off a cliff, I didn't know the truth. As I was dying, I heard her gloating voice telling me the first child I lost hadn't been an accident at all. It was her masterpiece, plotted together with my mother-in-law. And Ethan, the man who was my husband in name only, had always believed that I faked a pregnancy just to trick him into marriage. When I opened my eyes again, I had returned to that very day, the day he came to me after I had just lost our first child, ready to settle accounts. This time, I wouldn't repeat the same mistake. I didn't want him anymore. What did you just say? Ethan asked, disbelief written all over his face. I curled my lips and repeated. I said divorce. When will we handle the paperwork? My question left him speechless. He was still wearing his crisp military uniform, the insignia on his shoulders gleaming faintly under the dim light. He was the youngest and most capable regiment commander in the entire base, the dream of countless young women. For 15 years, he had been the light I threw myself toward like a moth to a flame. But now, I no longer needed that light. It burned the hand and seared the heart. Lynn, what trick are you playing? He snapped back to his senses. His brows furrowed tightly, clearly thinking I was retreating only to advance again. What trick could I possibly be playing, Commander Carter? Wasn't it you who asked for a divorce? I agreed. And you're still not satisfied? I threw off the thin blanket and slowly sat up. The heavy ache in my lower belly reminded me of the child who had just taken form but already left me. In my past life, I had cried all my tears for him. In this life, all I felt was relief. Thank goodness that child wouldn't have to be born into such a broken family. Divorce is fine, I continued, but I have a few conditions. I looked at him, my words firm and clear. A mocking smile flickered across Ethan's face. Finally showing your true colors. Tell me, how much money do you want? In his eyes, I was nothing but a greedy country woman with no bottom line. I ignored his sneer and held up 3 fingers. First, when we got married, you gave me $300 as a bride price. I'll return every cent, the sewing machine, radio, and everything I brought with me. I'll take them all back. Ethan froze. Second, the house we live in is government allocated for officers. Once we're divorced, I'll move out immediately so neither you nor the woman you love will be bothered. My words made his face even darker as though he was about to retort, but I didn't give him the chance. Third and most important. I paused, meeting his probing gaze, and spelled out each word. From now on, whether in marriage or in death, we will have nothing to do with each other. You walk your road, and I'll walk mine. Ethan Carter, I hope you remember. You're the one who didn't want me. You're the one who abandoned this marriage. So, in this lifetime, you have no right to turn back. The room fell silent. Ethan stared at me, deep emotions surging in his eyes. Shock, doubt, maybe even a trace of insulted anger. Perhaps he had never once imagined that the woman who had always followed him, who had worshipped him like the sky itself, could now speak to him in such a calm, detached tone. Even as cold as I was when talking about breaking up, Ethan gritted his teeth and said, word by word, Lynn, you'd better think carefully about what you said today. I've already thought it through. I answered without fear, meeting his eyes. You're a soldier. When you say something, you have to stand by it. Tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, I'll be waiting for you at the Civil Affairs Bureau. With that, I lay back down, pulled the blanket over my head, and didn't look at him again. I could feel his gaze stabbing into my back like needles, lingering for a long time before I finally heard his footsteps turn away, followed by the sound of the door closing. Even though it was subdued, it was still clear. The moment the door shut, I threw off the blanket and took deep breaths. At last, the tears I had been holding back spilled over. But this time, they weren't for him. They were for myself. The woman who had died at 28 in my previous life. Lynn, everything is over now. From today on, you will live only for yourself. The next morning, I was awakened by loud noises in the yard. That jinx is finally getting out. Ethan must have been blind back then to value a woman like her. It was my kind and generous mother-in-law, Margaret Carter. Her sharp voice carried through the entire military housing complex, making sure everyone could hear. Right after came a voice soft as water, though every word cut like a knife. Mrs. Carter, please lower your voice. Lynn just lost her child. She must be heartbroken. Please don't speak about her like that. It was Emily White, the so-called gentle and kind-hearted beauty. In my previous life, she had pretended to comfort me while whispering in Ethan's ear, making sure the accusation of faking a pregnancy to trap him stuck firmly on me. I threw off the blanket, went to the window, and pushed it open. In the yard, Margaret stood with her hands on her hips, spitting accusations in every direction, telling the neighbors all about my supposed sins. Beside her stood Emily, wearing a spotless white dress, her face adorned with just the right amount of worry and gentle persuasion. The moment I opened the window, the noise stopped abruptly. Every gaze turned toward me, full of contempt and glee, eager to see a show. Margaret even marched right up under my window, pointed a finger in my face and cursed. You shameless fox, a barren hen. How dare you show your face? The Carter family must have been cursed for 8 lifetimes to bring you home. Get out of here. Return the bride price and take your dowry with you. I looked at her calmly. Margaret froze for a second, then rolled her eyes and snapped. Return it with what? You're just a poor farm girl. You can't even scrape together $300. Don't think I don't know. You plan to cling here and refuse to leave, don't you? Don't worry, I said evenly. Today I'll return every cent. My composure clearly caught her off guard. She opened her mouth to scold me further, but Emily gently tugged on her sleeve. Mrs. Carter, Ethan will be back soon. Don't let him see you upset. I'm sure Lynn didn't mean to upset you. Please calm down. Then she turned to me, her face full of feigned guilt. Lynn, please don't blame Mrs. Carter. She only cares about Ethan. Take care of your health. Every word was perfectly placed, showing off her kindness and generosity, while subtly making me the one who had angered my mother-in-law. I had no patience left for their play-acting and slammed the window shut. Through the glass, I could still hear Margaret's curses and Emily's soft persuasion. I ignored them and quietly packed my things. I didn't have much, just a few old sets of clothes, the sewing machine, a free brand poster, and the pink red lantern radio my mother had prepared for my dowry. At that time, these were considered top-tier wedding gifts. I was struggling to drag the sewing machine outside. When Ethan returned, he saw the scene in the yard and his brows furrowed even tighter. What's going on here? Ethan barked. The moment Margaret saw her son, it was as if she had found her savior. She rushed forward to complain. You came back just in time. This woman wants to clean the whole house out. She says she's taking the sewing machine and the radio. She claims they belong to her family. I stopped what I was doing and looked at them coldly. Those are part of my dowry. My mother gave them to me and the receipts are in my name. A daughter's dowry belongs to her husband's family, Margaret shouted, her voice shrill and unreasonable. Ethan looked at me, then at his mother. A flicker of irritation crossed his eyes. His voice dropped low and heavy. Mom, let her take them. Margaret froze, stunned. What? Ethan, are you out of your mind? That sewing machine is expensive. I said let her take it. Ethan's tone grew heavier. He rarely spoke to his mother that way. Margaret was so furious that her face turned pale. Emily quickly reached out to steady her, murmuring comfort while shooting me a look full of helplessness and concern as if I had committed some grave sin. Ethan ignored them both. He walked over, pulled an envelope from his pocket, and handed it to me. There's $300 in here. You don't need to return anything. Think of it as compensation. His voice carried the arrogance of someone bestowing a favor. I looked at the envelope and suddenly laughed. Compensation. I asked. Do you think I need your compensation, Commander Carter? Instead of taking it, I pulled out the $300 I had already prepared and shoved it directly into the breast pocket of his uniform. This is the bride price. From now on, we owe each other nothing. Without another glance at him, I bent down, lifted the heavy sewing machine with all my strength, and walked out of the yard step by step. My body was still weak, every step making my stomach throb as if it were being torn apart. But I clenched my teeth, not making a sound, and kept my back straight. Ethan stood frozen, his eyes following my retreating figure. He glanced down at the crumpled bills stuffed into his pocket, and a complicated expression flashed across his face, something I had never seen before. Dragging the sewing machine, and carrying a single bag of belongings, I walked out of the military housing compound. Behind me came Margaret's triumphant laughter and the whispers of the neighbors. I didn't look back once. This place carried too much pain and too many tears from my past life. I had no desire to see it again. In town, I found the cheapest inn to stay in for a day, $1 a night. The room was tiny, furnished with only a bed and a table, but I felt lighter than I ever had before. Lying on the creaky wooden bed, I began to plan my future. It was now 1977, just 2 years before the college entrance exams would be reinstated, and only a few more years before the winds of reform and opening would sweep across the country. This was an era of opportunity. In my past life, because of Ethan, I had been trapped in that tiny courtyard, wasting all my talent and skills. Since childhood, I had learned tailoring from my mother. She had been the most renowned seamstress for miles around. By 16, I was already skilled enough to sew a perfectly fitted Zhongshan suit for someone else. In this life, I absolutely would not waste my gift again. I would rely on my own hands to live, and to live better than anyone else. When I checked my money, I had only a few dollars left. The $300 I had returned to Ethan had originally come from pawning my mother's gold earrings, the only keepsake she had left me. The pain stabbed at my heart, but I forced it down. Mom, don't worry. I will buy back those earrings one day. What mattered now was earning money. Taking my precious sewing machine, I went straight to the biggest state-run department store in town. At this time, ready-made clothes were few, outdated, and unattractive. Girls with even a little taste preferred buying fabric to sew their own clothes or hiring a tailor. The fabric counter at the department store was always packed with people. I walked straight up to the person in charge of the counter. A plump woman in her 40s stood behind the counter. I spoke directly. Ma'am, my name is Lynn. I'm a seamstress. She looked me up and down, her eyes carrying a hint of suspicion. What is it, girl? What do you want from me? I pointed to the sample clothes hanging in the display case. These styles are too old. I can make new designs to hang here. If anyone likes them, they'll buy fabric from this store and I'll sew it. For the labor, we'll split the money 70/30ths. I'll take 70, you 30. At that time, such a proposal was bold, almost outrageous. The woman froze in surprise. You've got guts, girl. This is a state-run store. And why on earth should I partner with some no-name seamstress like you? Because of my skills, I replied. I pulled from my cloth bag a blouse I had prepared in advance. It was an improved women's shirt, the collar and cuffs trimmed with delicate ruffles, the waist fitted to highlight a woman's curves. At that time, such a style was completely unique. Her eyes lit up instantly. She turned the blouse over and over, her amazement growing with every glance. You made this? Yes. The stitching? Oh my, she could tell right away the value of the garment. She began to hesitate. My offer was simply too advantageous. She could pocket the extra wages directly, and new designs would also boost fabric sales and raise her performance record. All I need is a small corner, just one table for my sewing machine, I added. Give me 1 day. If no one orders, I'll leave immediately. I won't cause you any trouble. I pressed my case, and she clenched her teeth, finally making up her mind. All right, Lynn. I'll trust you this once. And just like that, I had my first stall in the corner of the department store. I hung the sample blouse in the most prominent spot, quickly drawing the attention of many young women. Oh, this blouse is gorgeous. The collar is so unusual, "Comrade, how much is this blouse?" I smiled and explained, "It's not for sale. It's just a sample. You can buy fabric here, and I'll sew it for you. I only charge for the labor." A young girl in a Tegan's shirt was captivated. She picked a bolt of floral fabric that was in fashion and became my very first customer. Right there in front of everyone, I measured, cut, and stitched. My movements were fluid, the sewing machine clicking rhythmically beneath my foot. In less than 2 hours, a brand new floral blouse with ruffled trim was finished. The girl put it on, admired herself in the mirror, and twirled around. Her eyes sparkled with delight. "It's beautiful and it fits perfectly." The crowd buzzed with exclamations of admiration. And so my business officially began. I was so busy the entire day, I didn't even have time for water. By evening, my orders were already booked solid for the next 3 days. When the store closed and the accounts were tallied, just the deposits alone came to more than $50. The plump woman beamed, her eyes nearly disappearing, and immediately suggested changing the split to 50-50, while giving me a larger space to work. Clutching the first money I had earned on my own, I walked back to the inn with a heart full of confidence. It felt so liberating to rely only on myself. What I didn't know was that at the intersection near the department store, in a green army jeep, Ethan had seen everything. He had come to town for a training session that day. When the jeep passed the department store, for reasons he couldn't explain, he told the driver to stop. Then he saw a figure, at once familiar and distant. I was sitting at the sewing machine, head bent in concentration, my fingers moving swiftly over the fabric. The slant of my face in the setting sun was sketched into soft, gentle lines. I was no longer the woman who trailed timidly behind him, forever watching his expression. There was a new light about me, a confidence, a calmness, even a brilliance he had never seen before. He watched as I smiled just enough while chatting with customers, as I moved briskly through the piles of fabric, each action neat and decisive. He saw me carefully tuck the money I had earned into my pocket, my face glowing with satisfaction. In Ethan's chest, an emotion he couldn't name suddenly surged, something unfamiliar. He had always believed that without him, I wouldn't survive. He had even prepared himself that if I truly fell into despair, he would secretly help me out of consideration for our marriage. But now looking at me, he realized I didn't need him at all. Not only was I surviving, I was living well, better than I ever had when I was with him. "Commander, should we head out?" the driver, Private Wong, asked softly. Ethan snapped back to himself, his throat dry. "Let's go," he replied in a low voice. The green jeep started and slowly drove away. In the rearview mirror, he watched my small figure fade, eventually swallowed by the crowd. Leaning back in his seat, he closed his eyes, and the words I had spoken yesterday rang in his mind. "Ethan Carter, I hope you remember. You're the one who didn't need me." Yesterday, those words had seemed laughable and infuriating. But in this moment, they felt like a thorn lodged deep in his heart. By the time he returned to the military housing compound, it was already dark. Lights glowed inside, and the smell of food drifted from the kitchen. He pushed the door open and saw Emily busy at the stove. "Ethan, you're home," she exclaimed, hurrying out with a ladle still in her hand. "I saw Mrs. Carter wasn't feeling well, so I came over to help cook. Go wash your hands. Dinner is almost ready." She smiled sweetly, wearing an apron, looking every bit the lady of the house. Before, Ethan might have found this heartwarming, but tonight a wave of discomfort stirred inside him. Margaret Carter emerged from the room just then, her face breaking into a wide smile. "Ethan, you're back. Come eat. Today Emily made your favorite braised pork." At the table, one older, one younger, their voices chimed together, filling the room with cheer. Margaret clapped her hands happily. "Now that jinx is gone, our house is finally at peace. It's time to think about you and Emily. Don't delay." She picked out the biggest piece of pork and dropped it into his bowl. Emily's face flushed pink, her head lowering shyly. "Mrs. Carter, what are you saying? Ethan just got divorced." "Divorce is a good thing. Now everything is clean. That country woman was never worthy of our family. Only Emily, educated, sensible, hardworking, truly matches you," Margaret declared proudly. Ethan set down his chopsticks without a word. He stared at the glossy braised pork in front of him, and suddenly remembered Lynn. She used to make braised pork for him too. Hers was rich, but never greasy, melting tenderly in the mouth. Every time he ate, he finished 3 full bowls of rice, yet he had never once praised her. He had always thought it was simply her duty. "Ethan, why aren't you eating? Doesn't it suit your taste?" Emily asked softly. He picked up a piece and put it in his mouth. Greasy, clawing, nothing like the flavor in his memory. "Ethan, maybe you should request the unit to transfer Emily closer to you," Margaret suggested again. "It's too hard for a girl to work alone at the infirmary." "Assignments are determined by the organization," Ethan replied coldly. His voice was clipped and icy. Margaret blinked, stunned that her son would speak to her that way. Emily's face paled slightly, but she forced a smile to smooth things over. "Mrs. Carter, it's all right. Working at the infirmary is an honor. Being able to serve the soldiers isn't hardship at all. Ethan is busy. We shouldn't trouble him." Her tone was gentle, considerate, exactly what anyone would call the perfect, understanding woman. But in Ethan's mind, the image of this afternoon suddenly resurfaced. Lynn at the department store earning money with her own 2 hands. Against that memory, everything in front of him felt unbearably false and blinding. "I'm full. You all eat," he said abruptly, rising from the table. Ignoring the stunned looks from Margaret and Emily, he walked straight into his room. Slamming the door shut after I left didn't make that house any more peaceful. On the contrary, it seemed to suffocate Ethan more than ever. I stayed at the inn for 3 days, and business grew better each day. The clothes I made were fresh in design with exquisite stitches. Word spread quickly throughout the small town. Every day, people lined up outside my stall, asking me to sew garments for them. Orders were already booked solid for half a month in advance. I earned my very first sum since coming back to life, more than $300. The very first thing I did with that money was buy back my mother's gold earrings. Clutching the small pair in my hands, I finally felt the heavy stone pressing on my chest lift away. With the rest of the money, I rented a small shop in town. It wasn't big, but it was right on the main street in a great location. After tidying it up simply, I hung a sign that read Lynn's Tailoring Studio. My little sewing shop was officially open. On opening day, the plump lady from the department store even brought me a basket of flowers and introduced several of her regular customers to me. I was deeply grateful. I knew she had helped me partly because she saw my skills could benefit her, but also because she truly sympathized with me, a young woman struggling alone. No matter what, I would always remember that kindness. Having my own shop made work easier and lifted my spirits. I was no longer making only simple shirts and long skirts. I began experimenting with more elaborate designs. In my previous life, I had pored over countless fashion magazines, and the images of styles popular in the 1980s were still vivid in my mind. I combined those designs with the local fabric and aesthetic of the time to create flared pants, one-piece dresses, and cropped blazers. Every new piece I displayed caused a small sensation. My reputation grew rapidly. Some even came by train from the neighboring city just to have me make clothes. My life became busy and fulfilling. Each morning I woke to the sound of scissors slicing fabric and the steady hum of the sewing machine, watching beautiful garments come to life in my hands. I no longer thought of Ethan, nor did I dwell on the painful past. Sometimes late at night on the attic floor of my little shop, listening to the wind outside, I felt as though a lifetime separated me from the woman I once was. In my previous life, I had been choking down tears with every meal in that cold house, endlessly waiting for a man who never looked back. But in this life, I had my own career and the ability to control my life. The feeling was indescribably good. One day, while I was busy in the shop, an unexpected visitor appeared at the door. It was Ethan. He was no longer in uniform but wore a crisp white shirt and sturdy green trousers, his hair slicked neatly. He stood at the entrance, watching the bustling shop, watching me at ease among the crowd, his eyes full of conflicting emotions. I gave him only a brief glance before turning back to my customers. To me, he was nothing more than an unimportant stranger. A young woman clutching a bolt of navy velvet hesitated. "Seamstress Lynn, I want to make something to wear to a wedding. What would look good with this fabric?" "Make an improved cheongsam," I suggested after a moment's thought. I picked up a pencil and quickly sketched a small standing collar shaped into a butterfly, the waist tightly fitted, the skirt cut into a fishtail. When you walk, it will be stunning. The girl's eyes lit up at the drawing. Oh my God, it's gorgeous. You're amazing, seamstress Lynn. Do it just like this, no matter the price. I smiled, wrote down her measurements and requests, and after finishing, lifted my head to find Ethan still standing there. The other customers in the shop were sneaking glances at him. After all, a tall, handsome man with such a commanding aura was rare in a small town like this. I frowned, set down my tools and walked over. My tone was polite but distant. Is there something you need? Ethan's Adam's apple bobbed slightly. He seemed to want to say many things, but in the end he only pulled a small paper package from his pocket and handed it to me. You left in a hurry the other day. You forgot this. I opened it. Inside was a bundle of brown sugar, the very same I had kept in the kitchen cupboard back at the Carter house. I looked at that bundle of brown sugar and almost laughed. We were already divorced, yet he had gone out of his way just to bring me this. Thanks but no thanks. I pushed it back. I don't need this anymore. Yes, I truly didn't. My body, thanks to my own care, had nearly recovered completely. I was no longer the weak Lynn who needed brown sugar to ease the pain. Ethan's face paled slightly, his hand holding the sugar hanging stiff in midair. Lynn, he rasped, my name catching in his throat. Can we talk? I don't see anything left for us to talk about. I cut him off firmly. If you're here to place an order, I'll be glad to help. If not, please leave. Don't interfere with my business. My words landed like a slap across his face. Ethan Carter, the proud commander admired by so many, had never been rejected so decisively. His face shifted between green and white, his knuckles whitening around the packet of sugar until the bones stood out. All the customers in the shop had turned to watch us, the atmosphere suddenly heavy and awkward. Lynn, must you really speak to me like this? His voice trembled with barely restrained anger. And if I don't? I replied evenly. We're divorced. Keeping our distance is the most basic respect between two people. Respect. His lips twisted into a bitter, self-mocking smile. You of all people talking to me about respect. To marry me, you faked a pregnancy and deceived everyone. Where was your respect then? His voice wasn't loud, but it was clear enough for every customer in the shop to hear. In an instant, the curious, admiring looks around us shifted into disdain and realization. So she tricked him into marriage. She looked so gentle. No wonder they divorced. The whispers fell on me like 1,000 needles stabbing into my skin. My hand at my side clenched slowly. I had always known that deep down he believed this of me. I had always known that if this ever came to light, the consequences would be brutal. But I never imagined he would choose to say it here in my shop in front of my customers. Did he want to ruin me? To destroy my reputation, my business, and force me back into dependence on him? I lifted my head, meeting his furious, contemptuous gaze. Ethan Carter, you say I faked a pregnancy to trick you into marriage? Then where's your proof? Show me the proof. He let out a cold laugh. Do I need proof? If you weren't guilty, why didn't you go to the hospital? If you weren't guilty, why didn't you explain a single word when the baby was lost? I did go. My voice was steady, each word deliberate. That day my stomach hurt so badly I could barely walk. I was on my way to the infirmary when I collapsed before I even got there. I explained it to you, but you never believed a single word. You only believed your mother. You only believed Emily White. Whatever they said, you accepted. Whatever I said, you dismissed as lies and excuses. My tone wasn't loud, but every word struck directly at his heart. He froze. His mind reeled back to that day, receiving his mother's call, saying I was bleeding, his panic as he rushed back from the barracks, finding me pale and weak on the bed, while his mother sobbed, and Emily hovered gently at his side. His mother had insisted I had fallen on my own and lost the baby, while Emily, in her soft, caring voice, had mentioned that just days before, she had seen me secretly drinking a herbal concoction known to cause miscarriage. Back then, he had been so furious, so clouded by anger that he was convinced the lie had been exposed. He ignored me, wrote off the loss of our child, and pushed all the blame onto me. He had stormed into the room demanding answers, but I had only cried without saying a word. It wasn't that I hadn't spoken. It was that he had never given me the chance to. Ethan's lips moved, but his throat tightened, and he couldn't get a single word out. Commander Carter. I cut off his hesitation and stepped forward, looking him straight in the eye. I don't want to revisit the past. Who was right or wrong doesn't matter anymore. I have my own life now, and I'm living it well. Please don't come here and disturb me again. As for the accusation of faking a pregnancy, I turned and looked around at the customers in the shop, raising my voice so everyone could hear. Let me make it clear today. I, Lynn, have never faked a pregnancy to trick anyone into marriage. If I ever spoke half a lie about that, may lightning strike me down where I stand. In this era, an oath like that carried tremendous weight. The moment the words left my lips, the shop fell silent. Everyone was struck by the force of my declaration. Ethan's face drained of all color. He stared at me, at the resolve and honesty in my eyes. And for the first time, a crack appeared in the wall of conviction he had held on to for so long. Could it be he had been wrong? The customer who had ordered the kwang stepped forward with open displeasure. We're still waiting for seamstress Lynn to finish our clothes. If you want to quarrel about your marriage, take it home. Don't waste our time. We're not married, I corrected firmly. We're already divorced. The woman blinked, then nodded, her gaze at Ethan carrying even more reproach. Under all those eyes, he looked utterly humiliated. His lips trembled, but in the end he couldn't force out a single word. He turned abruptly and hurried out of the shop. His broad back, once so imposing, looked stripped of all dignity. After Ethan left, the atmosphere in the store grew strange. Customers stopped whispering, but their eyes still lingered on me with curiosity and pity. I ignored it all, pretending nothing had happened and buried myself back in work. I knew that my actions carried more weight than 1,000 words of explanation. That entire afternoon, I completed 3 sets of clothes. My stitching was meticulous, my designs innovative, and customers praised me endlessly. Soon enough, the incident was forgotten. When the last client left, I locked the shop and collapsed into a chair, exhausted. Serving customers was draining enough. But what had truly worn me out was the confrontation with Ethan. I had thought my heart was as calm as still water. Yet, when he hurled those 4 words, fake pregnancy scam, it still pierced me. That accusation had been the heaviest stone crushing me through 2 lifetimes. I rubbed at my aching temples and forced myself not to think about it any longer. The next morning, I opened the shop as usual. To my surprise, the woman who had ordered the kongum yesterday returned, and this time she brought several friends, wives of well-known officials in the county. Lynn, I brought some customers for you, she announced brightly as soon as she stepped in. I hurried forward. Thank you so much, Mrs. Vaughn. Thank me for what? We all trust your skills. Mrs. Vaughn patted my shoulder, then lowered her voice conspiratorially. But tell me, was that really your ex-husband yesterday? I nodded. So handsome and yet such a disappointment. Mrs. Vaughn scowled on my behalf. Divorce is good. With your talent, finding a better man won't be hard. Her friends chimed in one after another. That's right. A man like that would bring nothing but bad luck. Don't be sad, Lynn. We women can live brilliantly on our own. Hearing their words of comfort, warmth spread through my chest. I smiled and thanked them sincerely. Let's put the past aside. Please have a seat and tell me what style you'd like, I said, steering the conversation back to work. Thanks to Mrs. Vaughn's word of mouth, my image quickly spread among the women of the county. A strong woman, wronged but self-reliant, who had risen on her own. As a result, instead of hurting my business, the incident only made it flourish. Many came to me not only for my skill but also out of sympathy and a desire to support me. My little shop gradually became a unique sight in town. Of course, news of my success eventually reached the military compound. Margaret Carter flew into a rage, smashing several bowls in her hands. This is outrageous. That wretch dared to open a shop outside and it's thriving. Where did she get the money? She must have stolen it from you, Ethan. You need to go get it back. We can't let her take advantage like this, she shouted at her son. But Ethan just sat silently on the sofa, a cigarette burning down between his fingers, the ash trembling as it grew long. He didn't respond to his mother's shrieking. His mind kept circling back to my words that day. I went to the infirmary, but you didn't believe a single word. I explained. And you still didn't believe. Could it be he really had been wrong? Ethan, stop smoking. It's bad for your health, Emily White said softly as she came over, gently plucking the cigarette from his hand. She was wearing a new pink dress, the latest fashionable style, but to him, it looked strangely garish. Emily, his voice was hoarse. That day when Lynn miscarried, did you see anything? Emily's body stiffened, though she quickly regained composure. She lowered her eyes, her long lashes hiding her expression. Ethan, why bring this up now? It's over. I'm asking you, what exactly did you see? His voice sharpened suddenly, demanding. Startled, Emily's eyes filled with tears. I didn't see anything. When I got there, Lynn was already lying on the ground. I panicked and rushed to call Mrs. Carter. Is that really the truth? His gaze pinned her in place. Hadn't she said before that she'd seen me secretly drinking herbs to induce miscarriage? Emily's face paled. I only heard Dr. Warren at the infirmary mention that kind of herb was harmful to the body. I was just worried Lynn might not know and accidentally drink it. I never imagined it would turn out like that. Her tears rolled down in streams, her expression a picture of guilt and innocence. Before, Ethan would have softened at such a sight. But now her tears stirred no pity in him, only frustration and unease. Her explanation sounded perfect, yet suspicion still clung to him. Abruptly he stood, grabbing his jacket from the sofa. Ethan, where are you going? Margaret asked quickly. There's work at the unit, he said curtly, striding out without looking back. But he didn't go to the unit. The jeep sped straight toward the military infirmary. He wanted to speak with Dr. Warren and find out the truth. Dr. Warren, a man in his 50s with glasses, looked scholarly and kind. Seeing Commander Carter enter, he was surprised. Commander Carter, you're here. Are you not feeling well? Dr. Warren, I came to ask you something, Ethan said bluntly. About a month ago, my wife Lynn had a miscarriage. Do you remember? Dr. Warren adjusted his glasses, searching his memory. Yes, that day was critical. By the time she was brought in, the bleeding was already severe. Ethan's heart sank. What exactly was the situation? It was Emily White and a few family members who brought her in. I heard she had fallen from a dirt slope, which caused the miscarriage. Dr. Warren sighed. Unfortunately, the child was still too small. We couldn't save it. Fell from a slope. Ethan's mind buzzed, a roar filling his ears. Lynn had once told him that day her stomach pain was unbearable, and she had been on her way to the infirmary, but halfway there she had slipped and fallen, so she had been telling the truth all along. Ethan's voice trembled as he pressed on. Then before that, did she ever come to you for a checkup, or did anyone ever ask you about herbs that could cause a miscarriage? Dr. Warren gave him a puzzled look. Of course not. Comrade Lynn was very healthy. Apart from filing her maternity records, she almost never came in. As for herbs, we practice Western medicine here. We don't study those things. Commander Carter, why are you asking me this? Ethan didn't answer. His blood felt as if it had frozen in his veins. Emily White had lied. She had never heard Dr. Warren mention any such herbs. Why then had she made up that story? A terrifying thought exploded in his mind, swallowing all reason. He nearly bolted from the infirmary, racing straight home. With a violent kick, he threw open the front door and stormed into the living room. Margaret and Emily were sitting together chatting. They both jumped at the crash. Ethan, have you lost your mind? His mother exclaimed. He didn't look at her. His eyes burned red, searing straight through to Emily. Why did you lie to me? Emily's face went deathly pale. Instinctively, she shrank behind Margaret. Ethan, I don't understand what you're saying. Don't understand? He advanced step by step, his whole body radiating menace. I'm asking you about the herbs. Why did you make it up? You and Dr. Warren barely know each other. He never said a word to you, so why invent that story? Emily trembled like a leaf. I must have remembered wrong. Maybe I heard it from someone else. Who? Ethan roared. Today you'd better tell me the truth. Backed into a corner, Emily's lips parted, but before she could speak, Margaret sprang up to shield her. Enough! She spread her arms protectively and shouted. You'd corner her to death over that fox spirit? All she did was say a few words, and it was for your own good. She was afraid you'd be tricked. That's all. For my own good? Ethan let out a harsh laugh. So lying to me was for my good. Letting my child die was for my good. Throwing all the filth onto Lynn, was that also for my good? That bastard was lost, and maybe it wasn't even your child. Margaret blurted, her voice shrill. The crack of his palm against her face echoed through the house. The living room went silent. Margaret clutched her cheek, staring at her son in shock. You dare strike your mother? Ethan's hand shook, his eyes red. Looking at her swollen cheek, a flicker of guilt rippled through him, but he felt no regret. That was your own grandchild, he groaned out, each word clipped and cold. Then he turned on his heel, and left without a backward glance, leaving the two women frozen in stunned silence. He drove aimlessly through the streets, the truth cutting him like a blade, shredding every belief he had clung to. He had wronged Lynn. Not only wronged her, but at the very moment she was in the deepest pain and despair, he had driven the knife deeper. With his own hands, he had destroyed their marriage, destroyed their unborn child, destroyed the woman who had once loved him with all her heart. Regret and agony crashed over him like a tidal wave, drowning him. He slammed his fist into the steering wheel, the car horn blaring wildly. Lifting his head through the windshield, he caught sight of bright lights shining from a shop along the street, Lynn's tailoring studio. He slammed the brakes and pulled over sharply, stumbling out like a man possessed. He had to see her right now, this very second. He had too much to say. He wanted to tell her he had been wrong, to beg her forgiveness. But as he reached the shop door, the sight before him froze him to the core. A young man stood in front of Lynn, holding a bouquet of wildflowers, his smile radiant. And Lynn, she was looking at him with soft eyes, her lips curved into a gentle smile Ethan had never seen before. That man was Christopher Hayes, the son of the bookstore owner next door. He had just graduated from college and returned home. A well-educated, gentle, and courteous young man. He often stopped by my shop, sometimes to help his mother carry things, sometimes just to sit and chat. We talked about literature, current affairs, and our hopes for the future. Speaking with him was always easy. He carried the refined air of a scholar, completely different from the stern, overbearing presence of a soldier like Ethan Carter. Miss Lynn, this is for you, Christopher said, handing her a bouquet of wildflowers. A flush rose to his cheeks. I was out in the mountains today gathering material, and I saw these. They looked so beautiful. I thought I'd bring them back for you. The bouquet held yellow and purple blossoms with a few tiny white flowers tucked in between. They weren't rare or expensive, but they were clearly chosen with care. Thank you, Christopher. I smiled as I took them. They're beautiful. As long as you like them, he murmured, scratching his head in embarrassment. I heard from my mother that you live alone. It must be hard sometimes. If you ever need help with heavy work, just call me. I nodded and placed the flowers in an empty bottle. Under the bright lights, the wild bouquet seemed to bring new life into my little shop. We chatted for a few more minutes before he reluctantly left. I walked him to the door, but when I turned back I froze. Ethan was standing in the shadows. I had no idea how long he had been there, his face dark, his eyes fixed on the vase of flowers in my hands, as though he wanted to burn them to ash. I pretended not to see him, and started to walk back inside. Who is he? His hoarse voice cut through the night. I stopped but didn't turn around. This doesn't seem to have anything to do with you, Commander Carter. He lunged forward, seizing my wrist in a crushing grip that made me wince in pain. I asked you, who is he? His words came through clenched teeth, each one ground out with fury. I struggled, but his grip was like iron. If you don't explain, I won't let go, he growled, his eyes bloodshot, his voice unyielding. I glared at him. What does he have to do with you? Do you have any right to interfere? My voice was cold and sharp. Ethan Carter, we're divorced. With what identity are you questioning me now as my ex-husband? Don't you find that ridiculous? The two words, ex-husband, stabbed straight into his heart. His hand loosened unconsciously. I yanked myself free and stepped back several paces, widening the distance between us. "If you came here to make a scene, you've come to the wrong place," I said icily. "Leave now or I'll call someone." "Lynn," his voice was low, rough, almost pleading. "I know I was wrong. I know I was blind and cruel. I shouldn't have doubted you. Shouldn't have refused to believe you, the baby. It was my fault. I went to see Dr. Warren today. He told me everything. I also asked Emily and my mother. God, I was such a fool. I was a bastard." His tall frame seemed to shrink before me, small and pitiful. Did he think that just by showing up now and apologizing, I would be moved to forgive him? Too late. In my last life, when he and his family drove me to my death, where was he when I lay cold on the ground staring hopelessly at the sky? Where was he? Did he think a single flimsy sorry could erase all of that? "Are you finished?" I asked calmly. That calmness made his face drain of color. "Lynn, I've heard your apology." I cut him off. "But forgiveness, that's something I can't give. I don't want anything more to do with you. What we had ended long ago." Without sparing him another glance, I turned back inside and yanked down the shutter with a loud crash. I shut him out along with the whole world, leaning back against the cold door. Every thud of his fists echoed dully, heavy with despair. I closed my eyes, pulled the bouquet from its vase, and carried it out to the backyard, tossing it straight into the trash without hesitation. I would never again allow anyone the chance to hurt me. Not ever. The next morning, when I opened the shop, Ethan was gone. But on the shutter, the imprints of his fists remained, clear as day, a reminder that last night had not been some dream. I showed no expression as I rolled the door up and began another day of business. Life gradually settled back into its busy, fulfilling rhythm. Christopher Hayes still stopped by often, sometimes bringing a book, sometimes a few sketches he'd drawn. He was always respectful, never intruding when I was busy, only chatting quietly when my hands were free. Under his thoughtful care, I neither rejected nor encouraged him. I admitted to myself that I felt some fondness for the clean, bright young man, but I had just stepped out of a disastrous marriage. I wasn't ready to dive into another relationship. I needed time. Ethan didn't appear again. But I knew he hadn't let go. Across the street, the green military jeep was almost always parked there, arriving at the same hour each day and lingering for hours, only driving off once I closed shop. The man inside never stepped out, just watched silently from a distance, stubborn like a ghost refusing to fade. I pretended not to notice. Meanwhile, my business only grew stronger. The little shop was starting to feel cramped. A bold thought began to stir in my mind. Expand. Perhaps even open my own workshop. The idea, once planted, sprouted like wild grass, taking root and spreading fast. I immediately set to work, sketching designs, researching machines, scouting for locations. I was consumed by visions of my bright future. But trouble crept in quietly. That afternoon, a group of men in uniforms from the Bureau of Industry and Commerce stormed into my shop. Leading them was a fleshy-faced, middle-aged man. He glanced at the business license on the wall, then sneered. "You're Lynn, aren't you?" "Yes." "What is this about?" My heart sank with a bad premonition. "We received a report accusing you of hoarding goods and conducting illegal business. You'll need to come with us." With that, he pulled out a pair of gleaming handcuffs. Customers and assistants in the shop gasped in shock. "You're mistaken. We run a legal business," I protested quickly. "Whether it's a mistake or not, the investigation will tell." The man waved his hand impatiently. "Take her." Two younger men in uniform stepped forward to seize me. "Wait!" I shouted. "On what grounds are you arresting me? Who reported this? Where's the evidence?" "This little girl's got a sharp tongue," the leader sneered. "You'll find out soon enough." "I won't go. You're abusing your authority." I struggled fiercely. In these times, being labeled as a hoarder could mean disaster. At best, losing everything I had built. At worst, prison. My hard-won foundation could vanish overnight. Still resisting, his face darkened. He yanked my arm back and snapped the cold steel around my wrist. Pain shot through me to the bone. Just then, a furious voice rang out from the door. "Stop. What the hell do you think you're doing? It was Ethan. He charged in, knocking the fleshy-faced man aside and pulling me behind him. When he saw the red marks etched into my wrist from the cuffs, his eyes flared blood red. Turning on the leader, his voice dropped to a deadly chill. Who gave you the guts to lay a hand on her? The man clearly hadn't expected anyone to interfere, much less a soldier radiating such authority. He froze for a second, then puffed himself up, trying to assert his power. We're from the Bureau of Industry and Commerce, carrying out official duties. Who are you to obstruct us? The fleshy-faced man barked. Ethan gave a cold laugh and pulled out his papers. The man hesitated, then reluctantly showed his own credentials. Ethan barely glanced at them before tossing them back in his face. You dare wave a fake document around to fool people? Director Lou of your bureau is a comrade of mine. I know his subordinates well. There's no way he'd send the likes of you. The man's expression twisted in panic. You're talking nonsense. Am I? Ethan pulled a red officer's booklet from his jacket and snapped it open in front of them. Open your eyes and take a good look. Do you know what this is? Commander's identification. The impostors trembled violently, their legs buckling. They hadn't expected that behind the owner of this little tailoring shop stood such a powerful protector. Confess. Who sent you? Ethan's voice cracked like thunder. The group collapsed to their knees, terrified. Please, Commander Carter, spare us. It was Miss Emily White who sent us. She said if we shut this shop down, she'd pay each of us 100 yuan. Emily. Suddenly, I understood. She had been cornered and desperate, so she struck out recklessly. Ethan's face darkened, nearly splitting with rage. Without another glance at the worthless men, he grabbed the scissors from my table and snipped open the chain on the cuffs. Too deep, angry welts marred my wrists. He stared at them, his eyes overflowing with guilt and pain. I'm sorry, Lynn. I'm sorry I failed to protect you. I don't need your protection. I pulled my hand back, my voice as cold as ice. If Ethan hadn't appeared today, yes, I would have been rattled. But I also would have found a way to save myself. I was no longer the Lynn of the past, who only knew how to depend on men. My indifference made the guilt on his face weigh even heavier. His lips moved as if to speak, but in the end he remained silent. Instead, he glared at the trembling impostors still on the floor. Get out! The word was spat between his teeth. Like prisoners granted pardon, they scrambled out on hands and knees. The shop fell quiet again. Only Ethan and I remained. About Emily, he said heavily. I'll handle it. I swear she'll never have the chance to hurt you again. That's your business, not mine. I bent to straighten the fabric bolts scattered across the floor, not sparing him a glance. He stood watching my busy back for a long time before finally asking, Does your wrist still hurt? Let me take you to the infirmary. That's not necessary. Lynn, don't be like this. His voice carried a faint plea. I know you hate me. You should. I deserve it. But could you give me one more chance? I stopped and turned, a bitter smile tugging at my lips. Ethan Carter, what kind of chance do you want? A chance to make amends or a chance to hurt me all over again? No, he blurted, shaking his head violently. I just want to treat you well, to spend the rest of my life making it up to you. Make it up to me? I laughed, but the sound never touched my eyes. By giving life back to the child who died before it ever saw the world. By restoring the honor and innocence you and your family trampled to dust. He faltered, struck dumb, his face drained of all color. Take that cheap guilt and keep it, I said coldly, meeting his eyes without flinching. I don't need it. I'm living well, and in this life, I don't need you in it at all. Leave and don't come back. I dismissed him without hesitation. He stood frozen, his tall figure stretched by the setting sun into a long, lonely shadow across the tiled floor. His eyes lingered on me, heavy with pain, regret, and a despair I couldn't begin to fathom. He turned and left the shop with heavy steps. This time he didn't look back. I watched his figure disappear at the corner of the street. My heart utterly still. Some wounds once inflicted can never be repaired. Some trust once shattered can never be rebuilt. Between Ethan and me lay a chasm that could never be crossed. A chasm filled with the blood of my child, and the life I lost in my past existence. After finishing up in the shop, I closed early. Instead of returning to the small loft above, I went straight to Christopher Hayes's bookstore. He looked surprised and pleased to see me. "Lynn, what brings you here?" "I wanted to look at some books." I smiled softly and wandered through the quiet shop where only the rustle of turning pages broke the silence. The scent of ink and old paper hung in the air, soothing my heart. I picked out a volume of poetry and sat by the window. Christopher poured me a cup of hot tea and then sat across from me, reading quietly without disturbing me. Sunlight streamed through the glass, spilling across his crisp white shirt and the open pages of my book. Time slipped by, serene and gentle. In that moment, I realized this was the life I truly longed for. Simple, peaceful, untouched by anyone's interference. That evening, Christopher insisted on walking me home. When we reached the shop, he suddenly stopped, looking a little tense. "Lynn, can I ask you something?" "Of course," I said. "Is there any chance you and your ex-husband might get back together?" His voice was cautious, but in his eyes flickered a trace of hope. I studied his young, sincere face in silence, then shook my head firmly. "No." The answer was crisp and final. Christopher's eyes lit up instantly, as though filled with countless shining stars. Meanwhile, Ethan had returned to the military housing complex, storming straight to Emily White's home. Her parents, both officials in the military district, weren't home yet. She was alone inside. Seeing him charge in like a god of war, Emily's face drained of color. "Ethan, why are you here?" He said nothing, just strode forward and clamped one hand around her throat, slamming her against the wall. "Why did you do it?" His grip tightened and her face turned purple for lack of air. She clawed at his arm in panic, coughing violently. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Still pretending?" The murderous rage in his eyes was nearly tangible. "Was it you who hired men to wreck Lynn's shop? You wanted to ruin her, didn't you?" Emily's pupils shrank. She hadn't expected the truth to come out so quickly. Even more, she hadn't expected Ethan to treat her so ruthlessly over that woman. "I only did it for you," she choked out with what little breath she had. "That woman is a flirt, entangling herself with other men. I couldn't just watch her deceive you." "Shut your mouth," Ethan roared, his grip tightening further. "What right do you have to speak about her? You're nothing but a venomous woman with a heart like a snake. You were the one who poisoned my mother against her, who fabricated the lie about her faking a pregnancy. And after she lost the baby, you were the one who poured filth over her name again. Emily White, I must have been blind to ever believe you." Each word was like a hammer blow, smashing through every mask she had worn. Staring at the man she had admired for so many years, now filled only with hatred and the will to destroy her, Emily felt as though she had plunged into a pit of ice. At last, she understood she had lost him completely. Despair and bitterness swallowed her reason whole. "Yes," she shrieked, laughing wildly, the sound shrill and unhinged. "Yes, I did it. I couldn't stand her. What gave her the right? I've been by your side for years and yet in your eyes, she's just some shabby country girl." Emily White hissed, her face twisted with hatred. "I have to destroy her. Not only her shop, but her entire life. I want her ruined, disgraced, never able to raise her head again. Ethan, if I can't have you, then she'll never have you either." "Insane," Ethan muttered, stunned by the malice radiating from her. He let go. Emily collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath, her chest heaving. But even then, she laughed between ragged gulps of air. "Crazy. You're the one who drove me mad. You gave me hope, then crushed it with your own hands." Looking at her nearly deranged state, Ethan felt no pity, only utter disgust. He didn't want to say another word. He turned to leave, intending to go straight to the leadership and expose every vile thing Emily had done to make her pay the price she deserved. But just as he reached the door, a shrill scream cut through the air. "If you dare to destroy me, I'll expose everything. I'll tell everyone that you wanted to be with me. So you deliberately slandered Lynn to force her into divorce. And I'll tell them that it was your own mother who pushed her down the slope and killed her baby." Ethan froze mid-step. He spun around, his face pale with shock. "What? What did you just say? The baby? What really happened?" Seeing his panicked expression, Emily smiled triumphantly. "You didn't know? I thought you'd known all along." That day, Lynn had stomach pains and was on her way to the clinic. On the road, she ran into your mother. Your mother stopped her, called her a homewrecker, and refused to let her go. They struggled, and in the end your mother pushed her down the slope. There was so much blood. What a pity. The baby was already formed. I heard it was a boy. Each word from Emily was like a poisoned blade stabbing Ethan's heart again and again. His mind went blank, the world spinning. He had thought he already knew the truth, thought he had already endured the worst kind of pain. But he had been wrong. The truth was far crueler than he could have imagined. His baby's death wasn't an accident. It wasn't Lynn's fault. It was his own mother who had killed the child. And he, her husband, that unborn boy's father, had been a fool, dumping all the blame onto the most innocent victim. A guttural roar tore from his chest, raw and animalistic. His eyes blazed red like a lion driven to madness. He lunged at Emily again, completely losing control. When Emily was finally rushed to the hospital, her body was covered in injuries, 2 ribs broken, unconscious. Ethan was immediately thrown into the disciplinary cell. The incident erupted like a storm across the military housing compound. Rumors flew in every direction. Some said Ethan and Dr. Emily had been having an affair and fought when her parents found out. Others whispered that his ex-wife had come back for revenge and stirred up trouble, leading to the chaos. The truth, however, was buried under layers of silence. No one dared speak of it. Mrs. Carter wept bitterly at home, cursing Emily White as a jinx who had ruined her son's life, while also running everywhere, begging for help to save him. But this time, no one could intervene. Ethan had truly attacked someone, and not just anyone but a senior military official. The consequences were severe. Harsh discipline awaited him. I only heard all of this from Mrs. Wilson, who came to my shop for a fitting and treated it like gossip over tea. I quietly pressed my foot on the sewing machine pedal as she chattered, my face betraying no emotion. Lynn, tell me, isn't this the perfect case of bad deeds getting their punishment? Mrs. Wilson exclaimed, waving her hands for emphasis. That Emily White, honestly, she always. She looked weak on the outside, but who could have guessed she carried such venom inside? And that Ethan Carter, what a fool. With a capable wife like you, he still chose to believe some fake innocent act. Now look at him. Probably finished. Serves him right. I didn't respond. As for Ethan's downfall, I felt no sympathy, but no satisfaction either. From the moment he chose not to trust me, his collapse had already been sealed. He had only himself to blame. The only thing I cared about now was the garment factory I was preparing. After weeks of scouting and planning, everything was finally taking shape. I rented an old abandoned warehouse on the outskirts, and thanks to my connection with the plump lady at the department store, I managed to contact a failing factory about to liquidate. I was ready to buy their discarded machines at a cheap price. Everything was in place except for one thing: money. Opening a factory required no small amount of capital. Though I had saved a decent sum over the past 6 months, it was still far from enough. While I was racking my brain over finances, Christopher came to see me. He had clearly seen through my difficulties and directly placed a savings book in front of me. Lynn, there's 5,000 yuan in here. It's what I've saved over the years, plus what my parents gave me. Please use it. In an era where the average monthly salary was only a few dozen yuan, 5,000 was an enormous sum. I froze at his gesture. How could I accept this? I can't take your money. This isn't a gift, Christopher said with a gentle smile. Think of it as an investment. I believe in your skills. Your factory will one day become a brand known across the country. This is me investing in the future. His eyes shone with sincerity and intensity. Lynn, let me help you. I don't want to see you struggle alone anymore. His words struck the deepest part of me. For so long, I had been fighting on my own. I thought I was used to loneliness, used to relying only on myself. But at that moment, having someone stand by me without hesitation, telling me he wanted to help, I realized how warm it felt to be trusted, to have someone at my back. My eyes grew hot as I looked at him. Thank you, Christopher. I won't refuse. I'll accept this, and when the factory is stable, I'll return both the capital and interest to you. I don't need interest, he said, shaking his head. Summoning his courage, he grasped my hand firmly. All I want is a chance to stand openly and honorably by your side." His hand was warm and steady. I looked at his face, tense yet hopeful, and after a long silence, I gently squeezed his hand in return. With his financial support, my factory was quickly set up. I purchased equipment, renovated the warehouse, and hired workers. I was so busy I barely had time to breathe. But inside me surged a drive and hope unlike anything I'd felt before. Christopher even left his easy post at the bookstore to throw himself into building the factory. Though he didn't know much about management, his education and sharp mind helped me handle paperwork and outside contacts, lightening my load significantly. The two of us worked in perfect sync. He handled external affairs. I oversaw production. People around us began to notice the bond between us. Mrs. Wilson and other acquaintances often teased me, calling me Mrs. Chu. I only smiled, never confirming nor denying. I knew that between me and Christopher, all that was left was an official acknowledgement. I was waiting for the factory to be fully stable. I wanted that when I stood by his side, I would be Lin Wen. Independent, capable, strong, not a woman surviving only because she relied on him. That day, I was directing workers to install equipment in the factory when someone came looking for me. It was Xiao Wang, Ethan Carter's subordinate. He looked much more haggard than before, and after hesitating for a long while, he finally spoke. "Miss Lin," he no longer dared to call me sister-in-law. "What is it?" I stopped what I was doing and asked. "It's the commander. He wants to see you." Xiao Wang lowered his voice. "He's been sentenced. He has to go to the Northwest Labor Farm for 3 years. He leaves tomorrow." Inside, I felt nothing. This was the punishment he deserved. Between him and me, there was nothing left to say. "Miss Lin, I beg you, please go see him just once." Xiao Wang was nearly in tears. "The commander won't listen to anyone now. He won't eat, won't drink," he said. "If he can't see you, he'd rather die." Once again, he used death to threaten me. I almost laughed. "No." Xiao Wang quickly waved his hands. "The commander said he's not asking for your forgiveness. He just wants to look at you one last time before he leaves. He said he has things he needs to tell you." "There's no need," I refused firmly. "Tell him to serve his sentence well." I turned to leave. "Miss Lin," Xiao Wang suddenly called me back. He pulled something from his pocket and handed it to me. It was an old yellowed hospital report. The commander risked everything to get this from Emily White's house a few days ago. "It's your medical report from back then from the county hospital. It says you were 7 weeks pregnant at the time." My body stiffened. I took the thin sheet of paper and read it. The ink was faint, but the words 7 weeks pregnant, in utero stood out clear as day, searing into my eyes like a brand. This was something I had never seen in my previous life. Back then, when I first found out I was pregnant, I was both nervous and overjoyed. I had rushed to the county hospital for confirmation, planning to surprise Ethan with the good news. But before I could say a word, everything had unraveled. I thought that report had been lost long ago. I never imagined Emily White had hidden it. She held the very evidence that could have proven my innocence. And instead of speaking up, she let me be misunderstood, hated by Ethan, tormented by my mother-in-law. Just how cruel could a woman be? "The commander said he knows it's too late now." Xiao Wang's voice choked. "He just wanted you to know he believes you. He said he was deceived, that he's a fool, a bastard. He said he's sorry to you and to the child who never had the chance to be born. He said in this lifetime he doesn't deserve your forgiveness, but if there's another life, he'll be your servant, your beast of burden to make it up to you." I gripped the report tightly, my fingers trembling. But I did not cry. My tears had already been spent in my last life. All I felt was bitter irony. A truth that came too late. An apology that came too late. What meaning did they have? The dead could not return. The wounds I endured could never heal. "Go back," I told Xiao Wang, handing the paper back. "Tell him I've received it. Tell him to take care of himself." That was my final answer, and the only one I would ever give him. In the end, I did not go to see Ethan Carter. The next day, Mrs. Wilson told me she had seen him escorted out of the city. They said he looked gaunt, his face sunken, as if he had aged 10 years overnight. His mother, Mrs. Carter, chased after the vehicle for a long distance, sobbing like her heart was being ripped out. But Ethan never turned his head once. The man who had once shone as bright as the sun left my life in the most disheveled and pitiful way, disappearing completely, and my life did not change because of his departure. My factory, together with Christopher, opened smoothly. Thanks to both of our efforts, I named the factory New Life, a name that carried the meaning of my new life, and also marked a new beginning for the factory itself. On opening day, firecrackers exploded in the sky and crowds filled the street. Even county officials came to cut the ribbon. Mrs. Fuang, Mrs. Bio, and Mrs. Wilson all came to congratulate me. I wore a bright red dress I had designed myself and stood in the middle of the crowd receiving their blessings. Christopher stood right next to me, wearing a neatly pressed Zhongshan suit, his gentle eyes soft as he looked at me. He held my hand in front of everyone. This time I didn't pull away. I looked at him, at everyone around us, and gave a radiant smile from the depths of my heart. The very first batch of orders at my factory left us working nonstop. The styles I designed, at a time when minds were gradually opening, were adored by countless women who loved beauty. New Life quickly became the most popular fashion brand in the province. A year later, I paid back all the money to Christopher. On the day I handed it over, he didn't take it. Instead, he pulled out a small red velvet box from his pocket. Inside was a simple gold ring. "Lynn," he said, kneeling on one knee and looking up at me with eyes full of warmth and fire. "Marry me." The workers in the factory gathered around, clapping and cheering. "Say yes. Say yes." I looked at him, at the light in his eyes, at the kind faces surrounding us. My own eyes grew wet without me realizing it. I nodded firmly. Yes, my rebirth, my true new life, began at that very moment when I nodded. As for Ethan Carter, later I only heard scattered bits of news. They said that during his time at the labor farm, he kept to himself, spoke little, worked himself to exhaustion, and collapsed more than once. 3 years later, when his sentence was over, he didn't return to the army. Some said he went south to a small city and became an ordinary factory worker. Others said he never married for the rest of his life and grew old alone. But none of that had anything to do with me anymore. My life had turned to a new page. I had a husband who loved me, a career I was passionate about, and a quiet, steady happiness.